Welcome to the Bucher and Friends podcast. Here is your host.
Let's send it over to Rick Bucher.
Rick Bucher.
Will Blackman is still on vacation, and the NBA playoffs are still in full swing. So it's time for another edition of Bucher Friendless, occasional subsidiary of Bucher and Friends, part of the United WeCast network. I'm Rick Bucher. You can see me on FS1. You can read me on Bleacher Report, and you can follow me on Twitter at Rick Bucher. You can also follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Bucher Friends. By the way, once we get another 20 ratings on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, and they're screenshot and sent to at Bucher Friends, we'll have another drawing and give away another bag of swag. So help us with that, because we like hearing from you and we like giving stuff away. I know I've said this before, but this is a good time for me to go solo because there are several items I'd like to address, and this gives me the airspace to do it. Let's start with life imitating art, or reality getting its cue from fiction, or simply realizing that the answers are right in front of us if we just look and listen. I say all this in reference to the post-game interview with James Harden after Game 3, Rockets-Jazz, in which he missed his first 15 shots. Here's ESPN's Cassidy Hubbarth asking Harden about that start.
James, a hard-fought win despite you going 0 for 15 from the field mentally.
Yeah.
Yes, mentally.
No.
You didn't know that?
I went 0 for 15.
You didn't know that?
No, I didn't know that. From the field, I don't remember.
Now, one of the most important tools a reporter can have is a solid bullshit detector. As soon as I heard Harden feigning ignorance, I was skeptical. Cassidy rightly is astonished that he wouldn't know. The distinction is that she finds it amazing that he wouldn't know, rather than question the idea that he really didn't know. There's a little bit of cynicism that comes in with a reporter. Maybe it's something that with older reporters, maybe it's veteran reporters, I don't know. But there has to be a certain cynicism, and I see less and less of that today, for whatever reason. At least that's how it came off to me. I don't know her, so it's hard to say definitively. But the fact that she turns to Chris Paul to ask if he and the rest of the team knew at least suggests she believes Harden. Paul then gives away that they both knew by saying he told Harden that they don't worry about percentages and to get his swag up.
Chris, what were you saying to
I went up to him right there in that timeout and I said, get your swag up. You know how we play. We don't play that percentages. We don't look at how many shots you missed or made.
Translation? Harden knew he had missed a ton of shots and was losing a little of his usual aggression and bravado over it. Here's the other giveaway. And you may think I'm crazy for including this, but Harden is perfectly okay with being a prevaricator, which is a highfalutin way to say bald-faced liar. He plays one in this Allstate commercial. Here's him after putting one of those Chinese take-home cartons with the metal handle in Chris Paul's microwave and blowing up his kitchen.
It's a good thing you kept your fire extinguisher up to date. Don't worry about the smoke damage. I can help.
What'd you do to your kitchen?
What did you do to my kitchen?
I ain't do nothing. It's easy to, that's not me. He has a beard just like me, I mean, the beard is pretty dope, honestly.
Are you serious right now?
That's not me.
James, that's you.
Now, before any of you chastise me for reading too much into a commercial, understand two things. One, players have a great deal of control over and are very conscious of the image they are portraying in advertisements. Remember Blake Griffin and those Kia commercials? Blake made a point of wanting them to be funny and unconventional as far as car commercials go. He had a big hand in shaping how they were written and how he was portrayed. I guarantee you, James had the same influence on his role in the Allstate ad. Two, I know James a little bit. His beard makes it hard to read his facial expressions, which makes it hard to know what he's really thinking. But he likes keeping people off balance, and not just when they're guarding him on the court. Feigning that the silhouette of him on Paul's scorched kitchen wall isn't really him, while at the same time admiring the silhouette's beard, that fits right in with his personality. Which brings us back to the 0 for 15. He may not have known the exact number, but I am dead certain he knew he had taken a lot of shots and none of them had gone in. This is the advantage of having played or thinking like a player. I don't care how much or little you score, you know when your first shot goes in or when it hasn't. Last point about all this, and it ties in with all the chatter about Russell Westbrook's errant shooting. Nothing grates on me more than the inference that when a star player isn't shooting well, he should consider not shooting anymore. Few things sound more naive when it comes to the NBA game and how teams function. Or any profession for that matter. If I have a bad show on TV or a podcast, if I write a story that isn't my best work, my editors or producers aren't expecting me to stop working on the next one. That's the last thing I would want. If you're bagging groceries and you mistakenly put too much in a bag and it rips, are you shutting it down for the day and saying, hey, let's switch. Let me work the cash register? No. In any job where the show must go on, the show must go on. There is no, well, I guess it's just not my day eject button. Especially in a professional entertainment industry. Actor misses a line. Does he just go, I just don't have it today? Can somebody else step in? If they literally can't go on, that's different. But that's not this. If a player is a shooter and a scorer on a team, it's his job to keep shooting and trying to score. If there's an issue with the type of shots he's taking, fine. But in most instances, I see criticism of guys missing wide open shots. I even hear it from broadcasters who cover teams. Why are they continuing to shoot threes? Well, because they're wide the freak open. The answer is not, let's drive into the crowd that's underneath the basket. It's start making threes. You've worked all year long. You've made those threes before. Now, if somebody's taking shots, guys are not shooters taking wide open shots. Okay, that's not why you're out there. Chances are there's someone better suited for the job. The fact that you caught the ball in a place where you can't score suggests you did something wrong or there's something not right about the offensive scheme, one or the other. But for guys like Harden and Westbrook, who, by the way, does have 2 scoring titles, let's just think this through. The reason either one of them takes so many shots, the reason either one of them is entrusted to take so many shots night in and night out, is because they are the best option for scoring on the team. They've been entrusted with that responsibility all year long. They're getting paid to carry that responsibility. To suddenly turn to someone who isn't equipped or prepared to handle that responsibility because of a bad quarter or a bad half is, quite frankly, cowardly. And yet I hear people endorsing that notion all the time. It's the easy way out. Let's also go lightly on the historical proportion of his misses. The fact that his overall night, 3 for 20, ranks as one of the worst in NBA playoff history in the last 30 years, field goal percentage-wise, tells you more about how the game has changed. 13 of those 20 were threes. When Paul Pierce went 3 for 20 against the Nets back in 2002, 5 of them were threes. When Kenyon Martin went 3 for 23 in 2003, he attempted 2 beyond the arc. Vince Carter's 3 for 20 in 2000 included 4. Also worth noting, it's been 16 years since anyone has shot and missed that many. And I guarantee you it won't be another 16 years before someone breaks it or at least comes close. Getting up shots, particularly long range, lower percentage shots, is a greater part of the game than it's ever been. Now, counterbalancing that is it's harder than ever to defend, especially without fouling, but free throws are not part of this conversation. All right, I'm not going to spend much time on the next topic because I'm fairly certain all of you will agree with me on this one. The officiating has become a distraction in the playoffs. And the only reason I'm addressing this at all is because I know the league listens to this podcast, or at least it does anytime the conversation includes NBA officiating. So this is more for whichever intern got tagged with monitoring Bucher and Friends this week. I know your bosses don't want out-of-control tempers to disrupt or distract from the actual games. But asking the referees to err on the side of overreaction has done the opposite. There's a simple formula for determining who went too far. The players involved in a scrape or the referees in how they handle it. No one looked at Jared Dudley giving Joel Embiid a little shove to stand up for Jared Allen, or Jimmy Butler shoving Dudley to stand up for Embiid and said, whoa, going way too far. What's up with them? They did look at Dudley and Butler getting tossed and thought, that's going way too far. I was one of them immediately on Twitter. I was like, okay, they're looking at the review. Please tell me they're not going to toss these guys. And boom, gone. See how easy that was? Look, there are a handful of players that would take being shoved to the next level. But it's only a handful. And the fact of the matter is, it didn't happen. It didn't go next level. Yeah, they spilled into the stands. That was because of where it happened and the fact that there's always going to be, the players are, it's going to be a cluster. There's going to be a cluster. And I know you don't want fans being trampled. There was a kid involved. I get all that. If you're courtside and you see something like that break out, you should know I better be light on my feet. It's going to happen. Guys are going to go pitching into the stands after loose balls and everything else. We don't see guys getting tossed out for that. The level of injury is the same. So I'm not real clear on those who say, oh, like the kid could have been hurt. The fans could have been hurt. Fans courtside can be hurt at any given time. If it's somebody's going to potentially get injured, and that's the determination as to whether somebody gets tossed or not, I'm a little shaky on the logic there. Yes, you're going to say that having a scrape, getting into a tussle, shoving somebody, that's avoidable. Is it? Is it really? Do you think they intended to go into the stands when all that happened? And after the fact, tossing the players, that's going to stop it from happening again? I'm not so sure. At least not in another game. Could easily see it happening again. And how do I know the way these incidents are being handled is coming from the league, that these aren't just rogue referees? Because in every case, a respected veteran ref has been involved. Young referees, under the pressure or the first time in the playoffs referees, sometimes they'll get a little antsy. They'll overreact. Benny Adams has been famous for that, at least in my mind. But these are veteran refs. Ed Malloy was in the middle of the Sixers net skirmish. He's the one who tossed Beverly into. He's also the one who tossed Patrick Beverly and Kevin Durant. Jason Phillips teed up KD and Jermichael Green, tees that have since been rescinded. Those are both veteran, respected referees who are not going to overreact emotionally. And by the way, those tees being rescinded, that doesn't always mean that the league finds fault with the referee who gave them. If the tees squashed a beef, the league will consider them useful and appropriate, but simply not worthy of being kept on the ledger. Here's the problem with having officials look as if they're overreacting. It makes them look as if they don't have a feel for the game, which is the last thing you want, especially from veteran refs, because it leads to fans believing they don't know how to fairly apply the rules. I had this argument with Stu Jackson when he sat in Kiki Vandeweghe's chair as the distributor of fines and other assorted player misbehavior. There's being correct, and then there's being fair. Had to do with the Spurs-Suns series when Steve Nash got chucked into the scorer's table by Robert Horry, and as a result, a couple guys stepped a few feet off of the bench. That rule was applied. Can't come off the bench when something happens on the court. And the Suns got the worst of it. It felt wrong. Felt like justice was not served. And I know there are fans who are sticklers for correctness. Blow the whistle for every infraction you see. It's simple. Just call every travel, call every foul. I guarantee you none of those fans have ever officiated a game, have never blown a whistle in any instance, ever. In a practice, much less in a game. And I'm sure they've never actually seen a game called that way. But their belief in the sacrosanctness of rules leads them to believe life works best that way. It does not. No part of life works best that way. First of all, it's unrealistic. It's tedious and pointless and unrealistic. A referee's job, this is going to come as maybe a shock to some of you. A referee's job is not to identify every infraction any more than it's a cop's job to write a ticket for every violation on the streets. If a cop did that, he'd be too busy writing up people for broken taillights and not crossing crosswalks while houses were being burgled and drivers were speeding with impunity through school zones. There's only so much those who are enforcing the rules can do. They have to pick and choose what's most important for the good of all. It requires judgment. It's the same with referees. They need to make sure they get the infractions that create an unfair advantage or disrupt the game. Trust me, you don't want a game where every bump is a foul and every pivot foot that appears to shift ever so slightly is a travel. I've heard it. Players will adjust. Yeah, players will become robotic. Players will become overly concerned with the rules as opposed to playing the game. You're thinking so much about your pivot and all of that. Trust me, you don't want a game where that's happening. I've seen high school games officiated that way, and it's painful. And the refs, here's the thing. Here's the bottom line. The refs still miss calls, which makes it all that much more aggravating. You're calling everything, but you didn't call everything. All right, enough of that. Finally, my last item, and it has to do with the Lakers deciding between Tyronn Lue and Monty Williams as their next head coach. What I'm hearing is that Monty may actually have the lead for the job, which is a little bit surprising because his name kind of came up late. Tyronn Lue, his name's been in conversation, it seems like, for months. At least I've been hearing it in connection with this job. By the way, for anybody wondering, Juwan Howard and Jason Kidd, by all indications, are not in the mix. This really is coming down to Lue and Williams. And what I'm hearing is that Monty may actually have the lead for the job, but because he could be in line to get the 76ers job, if they decide to let Brett Brown go, he may pass. And who's to say that they'll let Brett Brown go this summer? Monty may have to wait a little bit, but this could be a little bit like the Bill Belichick, Josh Daniels situation, where it's, hey, whenever we do make a move, you'll be the guy. You've already been tabbed for that. So the surprising thing for me when it comes to Brett Brown and the Sixers is I just asked a GM about the openings out there. And I was surprised when he mentioned that they could make a move on Brown, because it would mean the relationship between Brown and ownership has changed dramatically. Because as recent as last summer, it was pretty damn good. Josh Harris is the Sixers majority owner, and I saw Josh and Brown roll in together for the TNT NBA Awards event down in Santa Monica last summer. Very chummy. Spent a few minutes talking to them. I know Brett well. And I've also heard Brown's relationship with Ben Simmons, is not the same, which is also a major turn since Brown has or had a strong relationship with Ben's dad. Ben's dad, Simmons, obviously, are from Australia. Brown coached in Australia. They've known each other for a while. So all of that is why I'm somewhat skeptical that this is really going to happen. But then again, I also know that there are, one, high expectations for the Sixers team. 2, that there have been rumblings and reports that Brown has lost the locker room. Again, that's a report which is tough to believe because of everything that Brett Brown went through and how much kumbaya there was with Brown and the players in that locker room. Now, the issue that he's dealing with is that Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons just, it's not that it's a fractured relationship. It's just a little oil and water. They're different guys. They're trying to occupy the same space on the court, off the court. Really, there's a decision that has to be made at some point by the Sixers. They can't build around those two and expect to win a championship. Somebody's got to go. And that's where it gets really tricky because Embiid, without question, is the better player. If we're just going on talent and ability, you're rolling with Embiid and you're moving Ben along. But there's the whole injury factor. There's the health factor. Yes, Simmons missed his entire first year, but he's been relatively healthy since then. Joel Embiid is still, there's way for a guy as young as he is. There are way too many games and stretches already where knee soreness or back issues or something else is affecting him. That's tough to build around at this stage. So it's going to be interesting to see which direction they go. And I'm just telling you, keep an eye on that situation with Brett Brown. And if Tyronn Lue gets the Lakers job, it doesn't mean that we won't see Monty Williams coaching at some point. Both Monty and Tyronn, by the way, are Clutch agency coaches represented, which, now that I think about it, I'm wondering how that works. I'm not sure that, Rich Paul is involved. I wonder who they technically have representing them, because if I'm not mistaken, agents can't represent both coaches and players. So, but one of those many things that the league decides not to take a hard look at, hard stance on. There's a lot of that goes on, or has at least over the years. One other coach who could be on the proverbial hot seat that I'm hearing, Billy Donovan. The feeling is that the Thunder have not markedly improved since last year, and ownership or management believes they should have. Now, there's been a lot of talk about Westbrook and what he has and hasn't done, but still, if I look at that team, and this is what's really tough. I don't know the coach that comes in there and makes that situation better. Offensively, it's just a challenge because Russ Westbrook kind of doing his thing is Russ Westbrook at his best. I don't know if you can confine him in a system. I don't readily see a system that harnesses the best of Paul George and Russ Westbrook. I just don't see that system other than kind of relying on them to use their creativity and see what it is that they want to do. Now, there are ways to make it a partnership where the coach knows this is what I want to go to in these certain situations. I don't get the sense that Billy quite has that gravitas with these guys. I don't see him imposing that. All too often when I've talked to him about this, it's he trusts them. And understandably, never forget, Paul George and Russ Westbrook have more experience running NBA offenses than Billy Donovan does. That's just the reality. So it's understandable that he would trust them more than whatever his idea is. Because here's the thing. You put something out there and it doesn't work, you've lost the trust of NBA players. It's a very short leash. So, bottom line, keep an eye on the coaching carousel. Making the playoffs, even winning a playoff round, is no assurance a coach will keep his job. All right, that does it for this episode of Bucher Friendless, subsidiary of Bucher and Friends, part of the United WeCast network. In the next podcast, you will hear a conversation I had with DeMarcus Cousins shortly before the thigh injury that abruptly ended his season and his comeback from torn Achilles. Looking back, there are things he said about battling back from the first injury that should give you a sense of his state of mind now. As always, thanks for listening.